This is beautiful Davos, where the World Economic Forum annual meeting has just finished. Now, we have been here for a week with this amazing view, although you can't see it is rather cold to be here, and we're going to be telling you everything that stayed behind the scenes here at Davos with the correspondents and my colleagues I'm super happy to have here. Here we go. This is Angela Barnes here and Meabh Mahon, and welcome, ladies. This is much cozier and warmer than it is outside, and most of the time we all worked, of course, outside. And the week is over. It's been very busy, put it that way. Tell me, what are your highlights? I mean, what is it that standing out for you from this year's Davos? Specifically, it's interesting, Angela, this is your first Davos. What are your highlights here?
Thanks, Sasha. Indeed. Well, gosh, there's so much to talk about, but it is my first Davos. And I just want to say, interestingly, when I used to sort of cover Davos from the outside looking in, for me, I always used to ask, is Davos worth all the money? You know, all those people in terms of carbon, when we think of energy and flights and things, and I know we've covered that a lot in the news. However, now that I've experienced Davos for the first time, what I would say from one of the highlights for me is just seeing how efficient it's been for leaders and for those CEOs to meet all in one place, all those bilaterals taking place back to back. And actually, you think of all the money they've saved in numerous flights to just be able to all be in the same place at the same time, which is really in itself quite incredible.
So it is worth it.
I would say absolutely. Yeah, it's a really incredible experience. Of course, there's a Davos bubble, and we must and take into account what's happening in the outside world whilst we're in this Davos bubble. But I really believe from the people that I've spoken to, and I know that we've all spoken to, that there's certainly a real sense of action and not just words.
Yeah. Meabh, great to have you back here. And what are your highlights of this week? What is it that's standing out for you there?
Well, indeed, Sasha, this is my second time coming here to Davos. It's been a real privilege to be here reporting this week alongside you girls and Hannah Brown as well, who's been doing lots of digital clips and the big question. So that's been great. And this year, as a reporter, I've been much better prepared for the climate as well. I remember last year suffering from nosebleeds and headaches constantly and really struggling with the altitude. But this year, I think I was much better prepared for that. And also for the intensity of the event itself, because I really feel this is the biggest and most impressive conference I have ever been to and I've ever covered in my whole entire life. And the amount of decisions and bilaterals and meetings that get done, and as you say, it's so efficient in just a couple of days. I spoke to one woman, she's been here 30 times, and she said it's just so efficient. She plans her whole year, and she's a busy CEO. She doesn't have that much spare time. But from a news perspective, my highlight was putting Ukraine back in centre stage. Ukraine really got the momentum that had been lost in the news for the last couple of weeks, and I'm sure we'll get back into that a little bit later.
Yeah, let's go. We're going to be mentioning some of the topics, of course, this year in Davos, and we're going to also give you then some highlights about who were the speakers that we met, who were those politicians and the decision makers that we interviewed, that we bumped into just walking down on the promenade to the Congress Center. So let's go with the topic. Now, you mentioned Ukraine, so I'll just say that this year it was different because, first of all, Davos started earlier. And normally the big meetings, the big speeches are starting on Tuesday. Now this year it started on Sunday with the Ukraine Zelensky's peace formula meeting that was taking place here, was co-hosted by Switzerland and Ukraine. Then President Zelensky, of course, himself was there. We're going to touch upon that. Ukraine absolutely was a big topic. And this geopolitics, the other big topic here was, of course, we're just a few months before the European Parliament elections, Meabh. And there was so much talk about this here, wasn't it? Because it's like the Brussels bubble also came to the Davos bubble, no?
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of bubbles. Everyone, indeed, I must say, is in their bubble. But we're trying to break down that bubble. That's why we're doing things as well like this after hours. The European elections, Sasha, obviously was a huge topic. It's 6 months to those elections, so expect a lot of coverage as well on Euronews over the next couple of months. The European Commission was here in numbers. From the European Parliament, we had no representation from the kind of bigwigs there. The Roberta Metsola, the President of the European Parliament, she was too busy over in Strasbourg. She wasn't here. And from the Council, we didn't have anybody. But from the Commission, there was a lot of people here. And of course, that was one of the major topics that they were bringing to the table. But I have to say, I think it was the American elections that people spoke about more. I mean, from Christine Lagarde, I think she spoke a lot about that, about how the markets were getting shaky, even at the thoughts of it. And even Scaramucci, Anthony Scaramucci, the guy that you all might remember from working with Donald Trump for 1 year as his comms advisor. He was here this week and he's fretting, and he's a Republican, but he said he's going to start spending a lot of money if he thinks that Donald Trump could potentially be in the White House again. So it was just interesting to see so many people talk about the American elections and kind of get scared about that potentiality. But of course, people say in Davos doesn't also come true, right?
Absolutely. And from a market's perspective on the point of the US elections, so absolutely there's this sentiment that before an election, and certainly as well with all elections, and it was noted a few times when I spoke to a few chief economists this week. We'll go into the details of those guests I know in a moment. But they highlighted how there's this sentiment that before an elections it's going to change, say, for example, the IPO market. So when companies choose to list on a stock exchange, and there's a sentiment that there will be less companies listing on the stock exchange, but actually sentiment is that it's going to be narrow perhaps for a while, but it won't really change too much. But of course, the market impact of who comes into power, it certainly will shift because, of course, we know geopolitics really impacts the markets, it impacts commodity prices, it impacts stock exchanges, and we see that globally. And so, of course, there is, as well as the interest rates in the trajectory monetary policy path of central banks in 2024, of course, keeping in mind that the other thing is just that's it, the geopolitics and the elections and what impact that will have on the markets. And that's why the buzzword here was cautious optimism among economists.
I also feel like it's very, very often that cautious optimism is something that we use to describe the upcoming elections in Europe, the upcoming elections in the US, and all the events, because this is indeed, like we have to be cautiously optimistic, right? Anja, talk to me about AI. That was a big theme here in Davos. And we actually do have some questions here, and please keep sending them because we're going to be commenting whatever you guys want to know. We're open. Talk to me how AI was a huge topic here, because we do have this question. Alice from Bologna. Were speakers more positive or negative about the AI?
Okay, well, this is very interesting because everyone I spoke, so I sat and listened to a Meta panel actually, and there was representatives from Meta and different tech giants in the space, and they were discussing exactly that, the sentiment around AI, and they were all asked the positives, the negatives, and the representative from Meta, she was obviously very optimistic about AI, the metaverse, and how the two of those will work together as well. But there was a regulator sat on this Meta panel that I was listening to, and she was highlighting the concerns around the ethics, and she was saying that current GDPR laws, of course, do not fit. One size does not fit all, she was saying, with AI. And she said the regulation is not, it hasn't caught up with the sort of the rollout at the pace of AI at the moment. So, she was saying, it's been said to me before, it's like getting in a car and not putting your seatbelt, not having a seatbelt. That's what it's like, kind of rolling out this AI, working with AI, but yet the safety measures are not in place yet to protect people. And one of the examples she gave was like the sort of the data, even like biometric data, when using metaverse and the AI, for example. So there was some people who were very much, so that the general sentiment was very balanced. There was a lot of positivity, a lot of optimism about the growth and how it will boost GDP. Many people believe, an economist and on the Meta panel was saying they believe that AI is going to bring a lot of new jobs. Of course, there's concern about the jobs it's going to replace. In countries like India, that was noted as well, for example, where, but then they're also saying India had a huge presence here at Davos this year. And there's a reason for that. They often say, don't they, who is going to be here in Davos is an indicator of what the agenda is going to be for the year as well. And sorry.
Just to jump in there on that note, what is the future of Europe? I mean, there was no presence of Europe on the promenade, apart from, of course, a number of governments. I mean, just explain what the promenade is. It's like outside the Congress Centre. So many people come to Davos and they don't even have a badge to get in. And the promenade turns into this incredibly impressive outdoor trade fair where people come from all across the globe to sell their product, sell their business, sell their country, encourage people to invest. But I didn't see like the Europeans very big there. It was mostly the Saudis, the Indians, and AI. And just on AI, for me, I feel AI was really the big theme of the week. The future is AI. There was signs everywhere. The future is human. The future is AI. And I asked as well Leo Varadkar, the Irish Prime Minister, what he thought of the new proposal for the AI regulation that has been like a lot of work to put together in Brussels between all the various negotiators. And in fact, Euronews, we did a huge conference on this topic on artificial intelligence before Christmas in Brussels. And he was very frank at saying, look, we will have to adapt. We'll constantly have to change that draft, that law that we have, because of course AI is moving at a very fast pace. But what I heard a lot here as well is that there's a lot of positives to AI that we don't know yet. The role that it will play in health, for example, in education. So it was not like scaremongering about AI. There was a lot more just, this is really going to change our life as well, positively.
Yeah. Well, since Meabh started mentioning the names and she went into there, let's do this. Okay. Let's go into the speakers. The way it happened this year, I mean, it's interesting to see who were the keynote speakers, and also, for example, at the Congress Center during the official WEF program, some of the keynote speakers included, like on the first day, we heard from Chinese Premier, who was here opening with his speech and his take on this, when he insisted that it is important also he said that China and China's strategy and policies are all based on trust with the partners. And that was an interesting statement, given everything that we've heard afterwards about China and de-risking the situation when it comes to the keynote speech by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. We've heard from her, we've heard from Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, we've heard from the UN Secretary General, of course, Antonio Guterres gave a speech. Emmanuel Macron was here also a few days later with his speech. Interestingly, I would say some of the people missing on the big keynotes would be a big American representation. President Biden was not here. He was represented by Antony Blinken and also the National Security Advisor, Rishi Sunak. Absolutely. So this is an interesting to see who was more present and who wasn't. Now, let's go into whom did you talk to, apart from Leo Varadkar, but what else? Whom else did you guys speak to? This would be very interesting to get your views.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. So, gosh, okay. Well, I think very interestingly, as we were talking there about the US presence, well, on the market side of things, we spoke to John Tuttle. He's the vice chair of the New York Stock Exchange, and we interviewed him exclusively for our new show, The Big Question, which is going to be out as well, and you'll be able to watch it over the weekend and next week as well with the full interview with him. And interestingly, so we talked to him about how geopolitics is impacting the markets. We asked him what the sort of the sentiment is among economists as well at the moment. And again, that cautious optimism came up. If we love that word, but it's very true. It's definitely a hashtag. And we asked him as well about sort of the markets, because in February 2022, when the Russia-Ukraine conflict started, after that, there was so much volatility in the markets. Oil prices, natural gas prices went absolutely sky high, as we know. And so now the fear is that with the Middle East conflict as well, the disruption as well to shipping disruption as well in the Red Sea, that there's going to be another sort of price shock and more volatility in the energy markets. And so he talked about that as well. It was something Goldman Sachs also talked to us about this week as well. And very interestingly, they don't see the same level of volatility because, as they said, Europe is more prepared now for that energy shock than they were before. And they were saying how, and of course Germany as well has done a fantastic job at now building its infrastructure without having to rely on that Russian energy, those resources. And so John Tuttle had some very interesting insights on the markets and of course the potential impact of the US election as well on the markets, and IPO listings. He also talked about why 2023 we saw so much European talent leave Europe, big companies choosing to leave their stock exchanges. We've got France's CAC 40, we've got Germany's DAX, we've got the FTSE 100, and you'd think they'd want to stay on home turf, but they didn't. Well, not everyone, of course, otherwise we wouldn't be following those stocks, but many big names left for the US stock exchanges. So he shared his insight on why he thought that was the case. And that's all covered in the big question. And I don't want to keep rolling on this because you all talked to so many wonderful people. John Tushla was someone, Goldman Sachs, KPMG gave their global economic outlook as well for 2024, a soft landing as well. Inflation is on a downward trend, which is great, of course, for more money in our pockets. Yep. However, as Christine Lagarde said as well, and what the economist was saying that I spoke to, however, you know, it's like the new norm. People are spending less. However, Europe's, they were saying that the US market and consumer spending is far more resilient than in Europe, and Europe is going to lag behind the rest of the global economy, they were saying this year, because it's showing less resilience. Meabh?
Fascinating. I'm really looking forward to tuning into the big question. Yeah. So, who did we speak to? Well, we spoke to the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. She was obviously in centre stage. She was also in private meetings with President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, also in a meeting with CEOs. We were supposed to have an exclusive interview with her, but there was a delay on the main day, and the Chinese premier, I think, took a little bit more time or started a bit later, which meant our 10 minutes with the Commission President got axed. These things happen all the time in TV. I mean, obviously our viewers don't see what goes on behind the scenes, but that happened. But we did get to speak to her very briefly and pose a question. And that was great to have a chat with her because there's a lot at stake now, especially for Ukraine. And as I said, that was really highlighted again this week. And also with a Ukrainian breakfast that I went to. It was like 7 in the morning. An incredible panel of speakers there. The Polish president was there, the Latvian premier, the Croatian premier, the Canadian finance ministers. And the people in the audience also were standing up. And it wasn't just regular people like me or you. It was like the United States main representative for Ukraine or really high-level foreign ministers and finance ministers. So it was incredible. And I was standing beside Bill Browder, who I'm sure many of you have probably read his books. I interviewed him as well before. So this is the kind of audience you're talking about here. But the big talk this week was this 50 billion euros that Ukraine is waiting for. They're still waiting for it. And even David Cameron, I forgot to mention, was on that panel. And he had a good old poke at the Europeans saying, I urge you to pledge that money. Because, of course, the United Kingdom have pledged a lot of money this week for Ukraine. I can tell you about the other people I met, but first tell us about all your panels as well that you were moderating and who were on them, I mean, and all the topics.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in quickly here, but, speaking of Cameron, because and in one of the sessions that I moderated that was focused on the subject of the EU enlargement, with great speakers, with the Prime Minister of Montenegro, with the Deputy Prime Minister of Bulgaria, Maria Gabriel, of course with such a big European background, with the European Parliament, to the European Commission previously. Then we also had a presentation from Ukraine. That was the deputy head of the administration of the president of Ukraine, and the business, the CEO of Scania, a huge company represented here, actually advocating for enlargement, saying this is good not only for those countries that do want to join the European Union, this is good for the European Union itself. When you accept these countries, when you get them on board, this is better for the economy and to make it stronger, and also to increase ultimately this competitiveness of Europe, the one that they've been mentioning again. When it comes to Europe and the economy, economically speaking, with the companies might be even leaving the European stock exchanges just because of something else, and some other market might look more competitive to them and better to be there, right? And it's an interesting thing, something that I heard on this session regarding the UK, saying how interesting it is now to have the UK advocating so much for Ukraine to join the European Union, given that the UK itself left the European Union, and this is actually being advocated by no one else but David Cameron. This is a twist. Isn't it?
And it's interesting just to show to people the high level of the audience people, because the people who pose questions in that panel, like a guy jumps up, I'm like a British diplomat, I've been all around the world, and obviously, I mean, and then there was a Czech entrepreneur. It was incredible. Yeah.
That's really quite amazing. But yeah, that's the thing. People have a short-term, well, not everyone, but of course, it seems there's either a short-term memory with that David Cameron was the instigator. He gave the power to the people to vote for Brexit. And we worked the night of Brexit, and I remember just being incredibly shocked when that vote tipped over the line, because nobody, certainly in the newsroom I was working room in London at the time, nobody was expecting Brexit. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
That even nobody in the UK, that nobody even in British newsrooms was expecting. Because I know the Brussels bubble, the EU got a shake-up, a wake-up call that morning.
But let's go down that memory lane a little bit. We're actually here to discuss this year's Davos, but this is like no. But I have to say, because this is interesting, but it is a great thing, because you made me think. I remember as well. I was working, like all of us, we were all doing the news, and we did not expect that to happen. And what happened? Like 4 months after the Brexit referendum, Donald Trump came to power. So this is like, it's not necessarily you can expect or somehow anticipate things. So, and this is of course goes as well into the whole conversation around Davos and so on about whether Trump will be back and what would that mean for Ukraine help, for support for Ukraine, for the relations with the European Union, and for the Americans ultimately, because this is what it's right. This is what it's about.
Absolutely. And just on people that we met as well and interviewed as well, I had the luxury and pleasure of interviewing a number of European commissioners, vice presidents like Maros Sefcovic, who's now in charge of the European Green Deal since Frans Timmermans, the Dutch politician, left for national politics a couple of months ago. I also interviewed Wopke Hoekstra, who we've reported on a lot in the past because he had an interesting background where he worked for the private sector, he worked for Shell, and now he's in charge of climate. So I asked him as well, had he changed any of his personal habits since becoming the Commissioner for Climate? Because now obviously he was the main guy for Europe negotiating in Dubai. And now there's new targets coming out about 2040. And this obviously will have an impact on me and you and on people. And the big plan here and the big challenge really for the Commission will be to bring people along, both industry, with their European Green Deal, which is meant to be their growth plan. But all industry see now is the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and also the subsidies in China, and they're feeling very threatened by that. But both were very firm. We need to bring business along, and of course we need to bring people along. But we'll see in June when people go out to vote in Europe if they're backing the European Green Deal or not.
Right, and this was actually, the Green Deal was one of the other sessions that I moderated here at the WEF Economic Forum with the Greek Prime Minister, with Maros Sefcovic as well, and the representatives from the business. And the businesses, they were saying, help us out with the regulations. We need to move faster. And this is interesting because this is also something very similar to what you said about when it comes to the regulations with AI. I mean, right, we do have the GDPR, which is amazing and which was already praised by everywhere across the Atlantic as well, saying this is a good set of regulations. But here we go yet again. This car is going really fast. And the regulations are not there yet because it's too fast. And that seatbelt that you mentioned, comparing it, works as well for the, absolutely. Angela, we have a question to you. Let's go here. With Milei in Argentina, the spectrum of Trump regaining the elections in the US and the far right ramping in Europe, what is to be expected from the economic tendency of the following year? An increase of market competition and liberalization are the crises?
Well, it's a very interesting question. Okay, well, thank you very much for the question. Now, I wish I had a crystal ball to be able to give you an absolute, clear, dignified answer. But this is something that I did ask some of our chief economists that I spoke to this week. I said, what particular, of course, what we do know is that if Donald Trump does come back into power, of course, it's going to change the dynamics of agreements and deals that we have in place, which of course will impact the markets across and not just between the US and it will impact every country. I mean, Donald Trump had particular relations with certain leaders, and so are we going to see those leadership dynamics, reinstated? And if so, of course, that means new deals, which will mean the impact on the market. Of course, it will follow. A lot of economists, a lot of traders and stockbrokers often say, don't look at the fundamentals. The fundamentals in markets is the geopolitics. The technical analysts always say just pay attention to the charts of the markets, and it's already factored in. So there's an argument that many of these considerations are already factored into the prices in the markets. But certainly there will be shifts in the market. Whether it will cause huge volatility really depends on the policies he puts in place if and when he comes back in power, if at all.
Meabh, on Trump, let's talk about the US and the EU if Mr. Trump comes back. I mean, we have to, I know, I do believe that the American delegation here was somehow not properly presented. I mean, I wish we could see more of the American delegation come. But yeah, this is the talk of the town, isn't it? When it comes to the US and the EU with the elections, Trump said that he wouldn't help and protect Europe should there be any threat.
It is such a statement, and that actually came out from Thierry Breton, the European Commissioner for Industry, the French European Commissioner, and he was in Davos a couple of years ago in the room with Donald Trump, Phil Hogan, the former Trade Commissioner from Ireland, and the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and he made that threat. So that is the reality, and I remember, in fact, after the elections, when Joe Biden was appointed as president again, I sat down with Anthony Blinken, and he said to me, "We're back, you know, and the relations are back on track." And it took a while to get that trust as well back on track, because there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that we don't see. Like, diplomacy is fascinating. You have to be so careful to get it right, because obviously there's issues that we don't get on with. There's so many when it comes to AI, right, all these regulations. We don't have time to get into everything now, but I mean, look, if Donald Trump comes back in, America's gone. I mean, headline, America's gone, pretty much, in the sense that when it comes to defence and when it comes to our neighbourhood, and if you look around our neighbourhood, I mean, Europe, we're in the middle of like 1,000 million things going on around us, and like we need to be able to stand up to all those challenges.
What I would say is, absolutely, as you said there, diplomacy is so key, and that's it. It's those diplomacy skills that, like from the economic perspective as well, any like rhetoric can shift the markets. And we all know Donald Trump was a real headline maker on a near daily basis in the newsrooms. You know, there was no shortage of headlines from Donald Trump. And that rhetoric, on a fundamentally speaking, it did cause market shifts, arguably. And so, of course, that would happen again.
And that's why the European Commission is always very hesitant to speak and give interviews, because, yeah, what they say can make market shifts. They don't like to say things just in case. And that's why they have this funny image of being so soulless, you know, with all their documents and legal texts and kind of wonky statements. They're not connecting with people. So they really have to find a way to connect with people in the next couple of months, you know, because otherwise we don't know who's going to be in the European Parliament.
Sorry, we're kind of stealing your microphone here, Angela. Sorry, but like, listen, when it comes to the connecting to the people, this is something as well I wanted to ask you. I mean, we are running out of time. There is like 1 minute left, but I feel like it's such an important thing. Getting the youth on board. This was such an important aspect here. We have like 1 minute and we'll have to stop this, but like super briefly, you guys spoke more about this, so I'm going to give you the mic, please.
Well, yes, I mean, this was normally the inclusive club for the rich, but you could see this year and last year a lot more young people, a lot more NGOs, activists, NGOs, influencers. Look, we were at an event the other night hosted by Google. We met so many young influencers, TikTokers. They're out there and they are brilliant. Like, they're so well informed and they're getting out there, getting the message out. I mean, I feel like, yeah, the youth, it's so important to speak to them and connect to them.
Absolutely. And very quickly, we interviewed a YouTuber who was paid to be here by Google. And we asked him about whether he's going to use his profile to influence the elections and how he's going to manage that. He was actually going to steer clear of it. But very interestingly, it's on our Euronews social media platform if you want to watch what he had to say about that. I know we're running out of time, so you'll have to go to Euronews, our Twitter account and watch his video.
Oh, that's it. And you could hear now we're indeed running out of time because you could hear the church bells. And Brussels, my love, special edition tomorrow from Davos. Meabh's got a lot prepared for you with the surprises. Thank you so much, guys, for spending this week with us and being there. Thanks for the questions. And we see you, on air, online, and next year in Davos. Bye.